Next up, we've got Jeff. Jeff works at an organisation called Simplest, and you're an account director?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Great. I'll bring up your slides for you.
Thanks. Cool. Thanks.
You're still loading.
Okay. Yep.
Left and right.
Left and right? Okay. All right. Don't we love technology? All right. So thanks, everybody. So I work for a company that helps all kinds of organizations to implement Salesforce. However, what you're going to see here is change management that can be applied to anything. So any change that you're considering to make or planning to make in your organization, even if it's non-technical, you can still use a lot of these topics and a lot of these strategies. Just like what Leah was showing you, you can use those same techniques or strategies and thinking to increase your adoption and have happier users and better outcomes. So first, we have to answer the question, well, what is change management? If anyone's done some project management in the room, change management is sometimes, we've made an alteration to the functionality, or we've got to get the vendor to do this for us. And that's one version of change management. What we're talking about today is at a slightly different level, at a more macro level, where you're enabling a change in your organization, whether it's around strategy, it could be around a process, or it could be around technology, or a combination thereof. So I really like the iceberg analogy in that, we talk about training, we talk about making sure that we are talking to the users by doing some surveys. We always make sure that we have a great, user interface. So these are all things we can see, and that's the top of the pyramid. But below the iceberg, there's a whole bunch of other things that need to be considered as well. And they're often things that we don't consider, we don't even know are there. And again, these slides will be shared, so I won't read them all out to you. But one critical thing, obviously, is getting your executive buy-in. So you need not just the ED to be behind you, but you need your to be behind you. And there will be times where you have to make a decision. Okay, well, do we include this functionality or do we not? Well, your ED might make a decision, but your users need to be involved as well. And someone has to speak on behalf of those users if you have too many users to go and talk to each of them individually. So there's a lot in there, but I'll just leave it at that. You guys can ask me afterwards, because we're going to break out a little bit later, and you can come to me and we can talk about any of these specific. So there's a lot of goals that you might want to include in, the goal of change management includes all these things. So it's taking you from your current state or what is going on today to what your future state is going to be. It helps build awareness around the change and why it's important and why we're doing this. It could be to energize the group, like Leah was suggesting. Maybe you want to name the project or name the system. So that helps energize people and get them on board. You want them to be more efficient and proficient in their jobs. So it's not just something that management wants because they need data. It's also something that can actually help their day-to-day roles, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's something called, you may have heard this term before, it's called a return on investment. And change management is definitely an investment. And what I mean by that is typically technology gets adopted by sort of with a hammer, if you like. Okay, we bought this, we're implementing this, good luck everybody. Or hopefully we've done some training. But what you need to do is make an investment in that change. And that is, training, it is bringing on stakeholders, it's having workshops, all these techniques that we're going to talk about in a minute. But to get a return on that investment, it's going to depend on these three different factors. It's going to depend on how many people have to be brought on board or how many people aren't on board. It's going to depend on how quickly do you want to get these people working in this new system. It's also going to depend on are they proficient enough that they can just adopt it almost on their own, or is there other improvements that have to be made? For instance, do we need to improve the data quality before we're going to be really proficient in the system and useful? There's a common misconception that you have a project, you have a project manager, and then you bolt on what we call OCM, or organizational change. And that is still done today. So this is nothing that's, unfortunately, it's not extinct, but this is often still done where it's literally you add on a person, for instance, to your team and say, okay, well, they're going to handle change. They're our change person. But it really needs to be integrated in the project. As Leah was saying, you need to be helping users at every stage of the project, whether you're in design stage, you're in development stage, you're in implementation, whether it's testing, whether it just doesn't matter what gate you're in. You have to have some consideration for what change is happening and how does that impact you. And the users, don't forget, is not just the people maybe entering data, but it's the people that are going to use that data later on and try to make a decision with that. So why is this important? And it's important because any project is more successful, and there's tons of research behind this, naturally, that says that organizational change management means that your projects are going to be much more successful. What this chart's really telling you is the earlier you get change management involved, the more likely you're going to have a successful project, right? So it's a bit of common sense, but as Leah was saying before, don't start your training down here at implementation or closure. Actually start your training at initiation. And there's training and then there's training, or there's learning and there's learning. And what I mean by that is, sure, maybe here you haven't determined what system you're going to use, but you're starting to inform users why a change needs to be made and what impact it has. I love project management, but you can't really do good project management without having change management. And that's why they go together so well. So this is one theory of change management. It's called Prosky. And it says that it's a triangle. There's three things here, and they all need to be there. They all need to be, it's only a triangle, it's not another shape. And that is, there's project management, of course. There's leadership and sponsorship throughout the organization, and then you have change management. So these are really three pillars of a successful project. And if you have a project that is missing one of these three or more, then oh boy, it's going to be challenging, right? So to increase your odds of having a successful project, of your organization looking good, of you looking good, of your people feeling good, and using the new tool or the new process, whatever it might be, then you really need these three elements there. Now, there's a few things you can do. Leah was talking about training and that T word that we don't like anymore. But there is also a bunch of other things that need to be involved or that you need to consider. That is, and probably Leah provides this to her clients, is coaching. So people in different levels of the organization need to be coached through that process, whether it is learning a new skill, whether it is how do I manage all this change, whether it is I've never done this before in my organization, I'm an ED, I'm not a tech person, they need coaching. So that's really where the investment comes in, is where you have to think about these different levers, and you have to use them all. You're not going to have a successful project if you just focused on communication, for instance. You're not going to get anywhere without sponsorship from your ED or your Leah was talking about training or learning and development. You're going to need to do that coaching. And then there's also going to be resistance in the organization. So part of what change management does is it explicitly addresses the resistance that you're going to address. And that's why you need to do surveys and do some learning early on to find out where are people going to be resistant? What do they not like? What do they like about the old system? What do they don't like about it? Because they're going to be the people that are going to push back. And maybe your ED is going to push back too. So you need to deal with their resistance that they have in their mind. Again, another very busy slide, but really these are ways and things that you can do to enable that change. Right? So there's leadership visioning, there's there's governance that's required. There's obviously end user learning and development. There is the themes that you want to build or principles that you want to have in a project. Some of you might have created a project charter before, which helps to get everyone on the same page about what is that project out to do, what are its goals, and what are its benefits that it's seeking. So there's a lot there, but again, each of these little bubbles is a presentation unto itself. Just to give you an overview of all the different things that you could consider to help improve the success of your project. And the doomsday slide. So what if I don't do this? I mean, this is something we can't afford, or this is something that we don't have the skills to do, or, well, that may be the case, but this is where the investment comes in. This is where you can scare people a little bit in a nice way, is that there's some ramifications of not doing good change management. And I won't list them all because you can probably see them here, but for instance, you might spend a little bit of money to go and buy that software. Maybe it's been discounted heavily, it's not quite free, but you spend some money. Wouldn't you want the organization to make the best use of that money that it's spent? So change management is going to help you to use as much of that software as possible so that you are ensuring that that investment you made is going to be fruitful. You're going to have employees that are not going to be happy with the change, and you may lose employees due to not having the best tools that are available. Now, I'm not a young guy anymore, for instance, but I love Slack and I love using Slack. So if I went into an organization that wasn't using Slack, now that I know what it is and how it can benefit me and the people around me, then I'm not going to be as happy in that new role because I know how good Slack is, but this new organization, they're not using Slack. So they're still sending emails around, hey, can I talk to you in 5 minutes? And we're sitting, cubicle beside each other, right? So that's an example of where staff actually do feel the tools that you provide to them, and they do actually, it does affect how happy they are. Now this chart is kind of cool in that there's something called the Valley of Despair, or sometimes called the Valley of Pain, where you begin to make your change to the future state. You're leaving your current state. This is how we do things today. You're leaving that state. The change begins, and if you don't do any change management or you do poor change management, then what really happens is that you're going to have some upset users. So that's what this Valley of Despair is here, and you're going to have you're going to realize the benefits that you're looking for much later in the project, if you realize them at all. And what you really want to be doing is you're always going to have this little valley down here where the changes come. People are using a new technology or a new process. They're not quite comfortable with it. There's always going to be a bit of angst there, even if you've done everything you can and you've used a lot of change management strategies and techniques. However, you want to minimize them, and you can do that by doing good change management. And this is all well researched, and there's numbers behind this. And don't believe me, believe what everybody else says. I'm just the messenger. And finally, what this graph is saying is that when you have real robust change management, you have much more. Hi.
Sorry.
It's okay. You have basically a 93% chance of meeting or exceeding your project objectives. And so wouldn't we all want to be meeting as many project objectives as possible? It's probably too expensive and probably will take too long to meet every one of your objectives, but meeting 93% of them, or 9 out of 10 of them, I would say that'd be effective. So that's really where, that's the reason why you want good change. And I think that's it.